NASA's Orion spacecraft is scheduled to return to Earth this Sunday. The historic Artemis 1 mission sent an uncrewed space capsule into orbit around the moon and has been sending back unbelievable close-ups of the lunar surface. Joining me now is NASA Administrator Bill Nelson. Senator Nelson, how do you feel about this reentry on Sunday? And I mean, we're all amazed at these pictures. You must be over the moon.
Absolutely, and still will be. This is a test flight. There were two things, big things, that had to work. One was the rocket, and it worked beautifully and almost perfectly. And the other thing is the heat shield, because it's coming in hot and fast. It's coming in at 32 times the speed of sound. That's about 25,000 miles an hour. And when it hits the atmosphere, it's going to be heating up to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And so that heat shield has to work. And then if you thought you were out of the woods, then the parachutes have to work. So, Andrea, I feel very confident about it. It's been an extraordinary mission. And now we're going to be able to put 4 astronauts on top in a couple of years, and we're going back to the moon for the first time in over a half century.
And if you can, for the layman among us, which is certainly includes me, what is so special about this heat shield, which is different from what we've used before?
It's a new spacecraft. It's a much more sophisticated spacecraft. It is a larger spacecraft, and therefore it has to have a new heat shield. And they are employing new kind of materials to repel that 5,000 degrees heat. When we come down from the space shuttle, we were coming down at Mach 25. This is coming in, instead of at 17,000 miles an hour, this one's coming in hotter at 25,000 miles an hour back from the moon.
Can you highlight some of the things you've already learned just from the mission so far?
Well, we had to make sure that the rocket is working, our tracking, our trajectories, that the spacecraft, which is a brand new spacecraft, that we have the ability now, since this is an international mission, and the systems that support the Orion capsule, where the astronauts will be, is a European Space Agency support module. So all of those things were new, much more sophisticated as we go back to the moon, not just to go and then leave. We're going back to stay, we're going to live, we're going to learn, we're going to invent, we're going to create in order to go further out into the cosmos with people. And the project is looking to the goal of Mars late in the decade of the 30s.
Just all extraordinary. And are the days of U.S.-Russian cooperation in space over because of Ukraine and the current hostilities?
You would think so, Andrea, but the irony is that ever since 1975, in the midst of the Soviet Union and Cold War, we have had cooperation with the Soviets, now the Russians, in civilian space. We built this huge space station together. We operate it together. We have to both operate it. The relationship between the cosmonauts and our astronauts is professional and good. And I see that continuing in a very professional way all the way through the end of the decade, when we will finally deorbit the space station.
Well, it's always a pleasure, and especially with such great news. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, former senator, former astronaut, thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrea.
And that does it for this edition of Andrea Mitchell Reports.